So I recently had an acquaintance come to me and say, Andrew, my Singapore bank is closing my offshore company's account. This is increasingly common where banks either refuse to open an account for you in the first place, or once the account is open, they say, hey, we're sorry, we're going to close your account. You have to move your money out. In this video, I'm going to share with you exactly why banks reject and close accounts for people and companies. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson, and this has become somewhat common in the offshore world recently. People have been lamenting for a while now how it's next to impossible to open a traditional bank account in Hong Kong, even if you have a Hong Kong company. People with offshore companies have reported increasing difficulties opening accounts. People who use the Estonian e-residence program to go and set up Estonian companies. There was a whole tract of folks who had their Estonian bank accounts closed. And Latvia next door had an issue where banks were really cracking down on their customers. Those are just a few examples that all come down to one word: de-risking. Banks are increasingly trying to remove risk, trying to make sure they don't get into trouble for a couple of different reasons. Banks are becoming more and more conservative, and they don't want customers who could cause problems. That's for two reasons. Number one is what happened in Latvia, where the central bank goes to the banks in the countries and say, you need to be more strict. In the case of Latvia, Latvia has been known as a place where a lot of Russians would go and bank. And so there were a number of Latvian private banks that opened up to take their money. What happened was after the US imposed sanctions on some Russian individuals, the US central bank went and leaned on the Latvian central bank, who in turn leaned on their banks, who in turn leaned on their customers. And so for a while, you would receive $7 in your account, and they would be sending you a stack of papers saying, tell us what this is about. Where's your money going? Where's your money coming from? We want to know everything. And sometimes they just weren't satisfied. And so that was because the central bank was pressuring them. In other cases, with some of the larger banks, you've seen fiascos or scandals come out. The banks themselves are under pressure from regulators to clean up their act, and so they have to only make sure they're accepting good customers. But that's what's behind all of this. You see, in the world of offshore, you don't have the checks and balances that you would in a domestic bank. They don't have all the different abilities to see, who are you? Banks will ask you a lot of questions when you open the account. We have a video where we talk about what questions they'll ask you, and you can watch that video to better understand that part of the process. But there's a couple things involved here. Number one, a lot of banks are just saying, no matter who you are or what you're doing, it's not worth a low minimum deposit to keep up with the compliance on you. So there are a shrinking number of offshore banks that will accept you with a $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 deposit. There are still some. There are many of them in the far-flung islands of the Caribbean, the South Pacific, etc. But increasingly, banks want a higher deposit. Even some of the island banks now want $10,000 or $20,000 because the cost of compliance is just too high to open an account with $1,000. So if you have an offshore company in particular, or even a personal account, a bank may just say after a while, you know what, your balance is too low. We're raising the bar. We don't want you. What they also might say is, we're raising the bar in terms of reputation. So in the case of this gentleman who came to me, he had a company in the British Virgin Islands, not the ultra low trust, bottom of the food chain offshore company. It's actually a halfway reputable jurisdiction, but they're saying, you know what? You don't have to file an annual audit there. We don't know what's really going on. We don't really trust the level of oversight that goes on in the BVI. So you know what? We're de-risking. We're going to get rid of a bunch of BVI companies. Or maybe they'll keep the ones where they have a good relationship with, high balances. That's worth it for them just to dig in, ask some more questions. But if you've got 25 grand in your account, they're just going to clear you out. And so what people will ask is, well, how do I keep my offshore account open? How do I get accepted for an offshore account in the first place? Now, if you're an individual, it's going to be a little bit easier. We talk about plenty of places where you can go and open an offshore bank account personally with relatively little money. You're not going to do that in Switzerland. You're not going to do that in Hong Kong. You're not even going to do that anymore in Singapore. But the bigger issue is for companies. And again, banks don't want to take the risk in many cases of what is your company doing, and having to potentially be left holding the bag for some unsavory activities. So they just say no. What's happening in Hong Kong, for example? A lot of people have historically been sent to open accounts at HSBC. HSBC in Hong Kong for a couple of years now has just been saying, no thanks, we don't want accounts. The reason being, unless you're living in Hong Kong, we don't know that we can trust you. We don't know where you are. We don't know how we can find you. We don't know what you're doing with your money. We want people who are living in the jurisdiction. That's the same issue that came up with some of these European banks, like some of the people in Estonia. Are you living in the EU? If not, we're scared. We don't know what happens wherever you are, so we don't want to take a chance. The other issue is the quality of the company that you have. So this is not the issue in Estonia, because you have an Estonian company, you should be able to get an Estonian bank account. But the issue is we don't trust the quality of your company. So a lot of people who just get started offshoring their business will say, let me set up my company in Belize or Samoa, the Marshall Islands. It's so easy. I don't have to tell anybody anything. It's private, this and that, all the things that really it's about cutting corners, right? It's about a hack. Hacks are dead in offshore. Hacks are going to have you suffering endless operational problems. What we want to do is raise the bar on the quality of jurisdiction that you are in. So if you're in the BVI, you might want to step up to the next level. Or you're going to want to go down the food chain in terms of bank quality. I think that increasingly, if you're setting up a company in Belize or Seychelles, you're going to have a problem getting accounts anywhere outside of the traditional offshore havens, the little islands. Even then, places like the Cayman Islands or the BVI are raising the bar on deposits. The Cayman's always being expensive, but other countries are raising. Now, if you have $500,000 or $1 million to deposit, you can find places really no matter where you are, as long as you're willing to answer their questions. But if you're just talking about smaller amounts of money, you probably want to take a step up in terms of the reputation of your company. If you don't want to do that, if you're like the guy I talked to, he's in the BVI, he's just going to stay in the BVI, you're going to need to go down in jurisdiction. So it's going to be harder to bank in Singapore. You might want to go down and just get an account in the BVI, get an account in Puerto Rico, get an account in the Cook Islands or Vanuatu. Perhaps you can go to one of the European countries, although they're basically done with the offshore centers. So you can see how this stuff is all related, right? Where your company is based determines where your bank can be based, because de-risking is the new name of the game. And so I think that a lot of people who have set up in these traditional offshore IBC jurisdictions are going to probably want to transition those companies into higher quality companies, even if it's like a Hong Kong, even if it's something else. You also might want to up your minimum deposit. I know a lot of business owners who have the money to commit to a bank account deposit, who have $100,000, $200,000, $500,000, but they don't want to commit it to the bank. I think increasingly the name of the game is going to be upping your deposit. The $5,000 minimum deposit just isn't going to work anymore if you want to be zero tax. So I think increasingly the situation, if you don't want your account closed, and if you want to make sure you get the account opened, is number one, present a case of what your business does. Have a clear business plan. Have a elevator pitch. You can explain what it is that you do so that you can make sure the bankers understand that you're not engaged in any kind of nefarious or unsavory activities. From there, potentially level up the quality, potentially level up the deposit in the bank account. And what I would also suggest doing is having redundancies, okay? If you have an account right now, or if you're going to open an account that perhaps is punching a bit above its weight, I always recommend having multiple accounts. So if I can have a BVI company and a bank in Singapore will accept me with that higher deposit, I'm going to then go out and fund those smaller accounts. I'm going to go and put a little bit of money in a bank in Cyprus. I'm going to put a little bit of money in a bank in one of the offshore havens, maybe the Cook Islands or St. Lucia or something like that, so that no matter what happens, I can always just tell the company, or the bank rather, in Singapore, okay, send it to the same company's account in Cyprus, for example, or send it to Vanuatu or Nevis or whatever the case may be, rather than having to take that money personally, which could be a potential tax issue. So what I see going forward in terms of bank de-risking is you're going to have to pick which things are most important to you. If you want absolutely no reporting and total privacy in the company, you're going to have to sacrifice some of the banking stability and high quality jurisdictions. If you want to live totally tax-free, you're going to have to commit to higher quality offshore planning and being a bit more prepared and potentially depositing a bit more money. To me, for most 6 and 7 figure entrepreneurs, the name of the game is going to be being willing to put a bit more money in the account, be a bit more prepared, and commit to a higher quality jurisdiction. If you do that, you'll have a lot fewer de-risking issues. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson from Nomad Capitalist. I wrote this book, which you can find on Amazon, to distill a lot of the stuff we talk about in these videos and a lot of the stuff I've learned over the last decade plus traveling all around the world, teaching you about how to legally reduce your taxes, build your personal freedom, and create wealth faster. Definitely get a copy of this book if you want to learn more. Now, if you want to watch more videos, make sure you subscribe to our channel and make sure you click the notifications bell so you never miss one of our new videos with more tips on how to go where you're treated best. And if you're already a 6 or 7 figure entrepreneur and you'd like to put these strategies in place for yourself, go to nomadcapitalist.com and learn about how I can help you.